Naruto exclusive videos Lemon are released on my Boosty. You can watch and subscribe. 50% discount on all subscription levels. Link in the description. Enjoy watching. Description: Uzumaki Naruto is a renegade ninja Konohagakure who joined the criminal organization Akatsuki and does not want to return back to the village. And his lifelong goal is to destroy the Uchiha clan, who, by staging a military coup, changed Naruto's life and destiny forever. Chapter 1: The Return. His body was shivering with animal fear, his insides twisting with spasm, and the hands holding his father's kunai, which had suddenly grown heavier than before, were not obeying. Naruto didn't breathe, pressing his back against the bloody wall of his parents' bedroom. He stared straight ahead into the calm faces of armed adults with bright red eyes. Helplessness pressed in. The thoughts in his head froze, displaced by fear. Beside Naruto on the floor lay the corpses of his parents. The corpse of his father, the strongest man in the village, was now staring at the ceiling, staring up at the ceiling with bloodshot blue eyes and a maroon slurry dripping from his open mouth. Naruto tried not to glance at his parents' bodies, tried to face the enemy, as his father had taught him, but as it turned out, that wasn't so easy to do when you were only 8 years old. Your enemy outnumbered you in strength and power, and when he had killed the man who had said those words to you, the strongest man you knew, something inside Naruto snapped. Terror tore at his consciousness. His heart beat as if it were his last seconds, deafeningly, desperately loud and fast. They were the last seconds, though. Dying was scary. Despair, strong and rumbling, beat in his chest, throbbing and growing. He wanted to run and hide. He was only 8 years old. He shouldn't have to see all this. His parents shouldn't have died in front of him. His mother's red hair, scattered across the floor, seemed longer than usual because of the pool of blood spreading beneath her cooling body. Hysteria surged up to her throat and clogged it with a lump, preventing her from breathing and screaming. Fear gripped her body, and it was as if time stood still. Naruto stared at Kushina's pale face, stained with drops of blood, and somehow thought that she was about to wake up. That just a little longer, and everything would be okay. That she wasn't dead. Yes, she's probably hurt, but she's not dead, no. That's impossible. And his father, he's the strongest man in Konohagakure, he's the Hokage, he can't just die like that. Mom. Naruto's voice was as if it didn't belong to him at all. It was alien, trembling and hunted. Mom! The boy called out louder, looking at Kushina's corpse with nervous horror. Helplessness, powerlessness, and the dangerous proximity of death were knocking out the remnants of the child's composure. Realizing that he would not be answered, Naruto squeezed his eyes shut and threw a kunai at one of the men. The kunai was dodged expectantly. A black shadow with scarlet eyes jerked toward him, one deft, confident movement, and in the boy's eyes, widened with horror and realization, the glint of a blade flashed like a flash. Someone stands between the enemy's kunai and Naruto, holding a small blade. We can't kill him, father, he says quietly and firmly, and literally covers the boy with himself, standing between him and all those armed red-eyed men larger than him. Give me one reason why. One of the men answers him dryly. Uzumaki flinches at that voice, but because of the darkness, he can't see its owner. He can't see any faces clearly at all. The bedroom is dark, broken only by the moonlight falling from the window and illuminating the corpses of his parents on the floor, so all Naruto can see are the outlines of faces and the red eyes of the killers. The smell of blood and death clogs his nostrils. He's not guilty of anything, replies the man standing between Naruto and the ninja. He's a child. And if that's not enough for you, he's a Jinchuriki. Konohagakure will be able to use him in the future. He drops his voice icily. If we don't get rid of him now, it could cause problems in the future. The voice says sternly. Father, the boy says quietly and firmly. He's the same age as Sasuke. Do you seriously want to kill the child? Is that your way? The threat in the voice is so palpable that even the chakra changes, and Naruto feels it. The danger from his family's killers is overridden by the strong, solid threat from the instantly changed chakra of the man protecting him. And Naruto suddenly feels that he really will be protected. He feels the same menacing power and unwavering determination that his father had. Good. The voice replies after a while. Take him, he orders. And let's go, we're not done yet. Naruto doesn't hear the footsteps, but he sees the shadows disappearing into the darkness and feels the threats slowly fading away. The guy turns to him and lifts him up in his arms. My name is Itachi, he says quietly, cradling the child against him. It's going to be okay, he says quietly, regret and pain on his face, which somehow seems more mature than it should. He presses his forehead against the child's forehead and clutches him in his arms. And Naruto suddenly realizes that his savior is scared, too. I'm sorry, he whispers faintly. But that's all I can do. I'm sorry. There is so much pain and despair in his quiet voice that Naruto shudders, wraps his arms around his neck and finally lets himself burst into tears. Those silent, helpless sobs subside as abruptly and quickly as they began. Terror still racking his body with shivers, Itachi silently holds him, pulling him close to him. The scariest thing about it all is that for the young son of the now dead Hokage, everything is just beginning. His nightmare isn't over, it will continue for what may be the rest of his life. I will protect you. His savior seems to be crying as well. It seems he is far from being an adult either. He doesn't seem to have been fully prepared for what he's about to see here either. I swear I'll protect you. He whispers firmly nonetheless and confidently wipes away his tears, wraps his arms around Naruto tighter and slips out of his house in a shadow. The last thing the Hokage remembered that night, Itachi's warm, trembling hands, his long black hair pulled back into a weak ponytail, and a shared feeling of desperate pain and fear burning his heart. Naruto opened his eyes abruptly and sat up, covering his eyes with the palm of his hand and wrinkling his nose at the discomfort of sleep. Naruto-kun, is everything all right? Toby asked concernedly, peering into the boy's face. You look pale, he notes. Idiotic dream. Uzumaki stands up and removes his sleeping bag, sending it to one of the duffel scrolls and looks questioningly at Toby sitting on the ground. Did you sleep at all? He raises his eyebrows. You could have woken me up, I'd have been on watch while you rested. The boy says glumly. That's very thoughtful of you, Naruto-kun, Toby says admiringly. But it's not necessary. He looks at the flames of the fire. If you say so. Uzumaki shrugs and stretches tiredly, kneading his shoulders and yawning before buttoning his black cloak to the middle of his chest and adjusting the collar. We need to find some food, he says, looking around. Is there anything around here? Kanehigakure. Toby replies with a chuckle. We'll be there in a couple hours. He stands up. If we move now, I'm not sure I'll be welcome there, but come on, Naruto said, smiling indulgently. I take it we need to get one of the scrolls? Yes, I'll get it myself. Toby nodded eagerly, putting out the fire with his foot. Whatever you say. Naruto yawned again. I'll divert the attention to myself. How much time do you need? He stretched again. I don't know yet, the man said thoughtfully. But I'll find you when I'm done. Uzumaki nodded and put his hands behind his head and walked with his partner towards Kanehigakure, talking about how long it had been since he had been to his home village and how old the old man cooking ramen must have gotten. Toby happily kept the conversation going, talking some nonsense about aging, shinobi, and eternal dreams where no one dies. Arriving and entering Kanehigakure, they split up. Naruto, who wasn't hiding and was calmly walking down one of the main streets, was spotted at once. He was instantly surrounded, looking wary, but with a tinge of fear and contempt. Uzumaki Naruto! The voice of one of the shinobi rang out a dry warning. Surrender! Naruto sighed. He was very familiar with those looks, though he was rarely looked at like that. Perhaps at one time in his childhood he had had that look himself. Naruto smiled indulgently and pulled out a kunai, slashed the throats of 3 of the 10 shinobi surrounding him, jumped up, created several dozen clones and used them to kill the rest of the shinobi, then sent the clones throughout the village. He landed on a pillar and looked around the village, which hadn't changed a bit. The clones were killing without much enthusiasm, it was tedious to kill shinobi who couldn't fight back. They were more enthusiastic when the Uchiha clan joined the fight. Naruto yawned once more and turned around looking for Ichiraku ramen. He was hungry. The clones, getting repulsed, began to die. Uzumaki smiled, feeling the familiar chakra, and jumped off the pillar. He turned around even before he heard his former teammate's voice, Naruto. Sasuke was only 50 meters away from him. Uzumaki smiled charmingly at him and immediately broke into a run in the opposite direction. His goal was to create a distraction, not to chat about the past with his former friends. He skillfully evaded the pursuit, leading the Uchiha, soon joined by Sakura and Kakashi, behind him, as far away from Tobi as possible. The Konoha police, in the form of Sasuke's scowling co-religionists, clearly serious and hostile, prevented Naruto from maneuvering, throwing kunai with explosive seals, trying to catch him with a fishing line, now and then breathing flames. From all of this, Uzumaki successfully dodged, while simultaneously fending off attacks from Sasuke himself and dodging Sakura's fists. It was fun until it became monotonous. When he decided that it was time to call it a day, Naruto created clones and, leaving them to deal with it, rushed forward. A familiar lake appeared in front of his eyes, and he stepped onto the water, speeding up and deciding to run to the other side. He was blocked by Sasuke, who had apparently managed to get away from the clones. Naruto stopped and looked at him questioningly. "Naruto," the Uchiha said with a frown and an obvious reproach in his voice. "What?" The boy tilted his head to the side, trying to understand his indignation. "Naruto." Sakura came up behind him, making Uzumaki turn around. "What?" he repeated, arching an eyebrow and looking at the girl calmly. "Naruto!" A stern Kakashi showed up after her as well. "Are you kidding me?" Frowning, Uzumaki couldn't stand it, looking at him gloomily. "Why did you leave the village?" Hatake asked sternly and lifted up his blindfold, showing off his Sharingan and the seriousness of his intentions. "Do I have to answer that? Isn't it obvious?" Naruto was seriously surprised and smiled wickedly, then repulsed Sasuke's quick attack and threw him at his sensei, finding himself in front of the three former comrades and looking at them with interest. "You wanted to be Hokage, didn't you?" the Uchiha hissed, clenching his teeth. Naruto gave him a cold, scrutinizing stare. "I was 13. He reminded him in an emotionless voice. How many years ago was that? His lips cut into a condescending smile, but his gaze remained haughty and cold. 5 years ago? He squinted his eyes. Sasuke remains silent and only stares back. He knows that the man in front of him is his smiling, good-natured best friend, who is now simply confused and in need of help. Too much has changed since then, Sasuke. Naruto's eyes slid for a second with a tired wistfulness, and he looked away, still smiling. You don't know what I was doing during the time you were looking for me. You don't know anything about me now. His steely gaze burned, the smile slipping from his lips, and now he was staring with unconcealed menace. We're not friends anymore. I'm not sure we ever were. He grinned hard and insolent. So back off, Uchiha. Or I'll make you do it. His voice was strong and angry. You're my friend. Sasuke shook his head and bared his katana, grinning. And if I have to beat it into you, I'd be happy to, he said, a determined confidence in his eyes, now as serious and focused as he could be. Naruto stared into his eyes for a few seconds. Try it, he said calmly and seriously, nodding slowly. Sasuke clenched his teeth and jerked forward, attacking quickly and confidently. Your problem is, Naruto, dodging his punches, made no attempt to respond, as if he wasn't even interested. That you hit without the intention of killing me. He crouched, dodging another lunge, the water beneath his feet rippling. Uzumaki smiled and raised his head, instantly moving forward and getting in close to Sasuke, pushing his attacking hand aside and grabbing his wrist. The Uchiha flinched. Naruto's face, contorted with a grimace of utter fearlessness and aloofness, was now almost right up to his face, and there was nothing of the past in those instantly reddened, animal eyes with the vertical pupil. It was like a completely different person. Uzumaki punched him in the stomach with such force that his insides would have been flattened if not for the protective layer of chakra, but even so, several of Sasuke's ribs were already broken. Naruto turned around and elbowed the guy in the back of the head. The Uchiha jerked in pain, hissed in sudden disorientation from the blow, and immediately reacted, looking with red-colored eyes, the eyes of his famous kind. "Oh," Naruto smiled. "I haven't seen your Sharingan in a while." He eyed the boy with interest. Sasuke's reactions quickened, his movements became more confident and precise, and he no longer hesitated, concentrating on the fight and dodging Naruto's truly lethal blows. This fight was completely different from any that Sasuke had been in before. Now he clearly felt that he was going to be killed. Every movement of Uzumaki was aimed at that, nothing unnecessary. He was aiming exclusively at vital places, and if Sasuke missed or did not repel at least one such blow, it would probably be almost the end for him. Which was why the Uchiha had to be serious in response, and the harder he hit, the more he lost control. The brighter Naruto smiled at him, dodging once again. There was not a shadow of fear or desire to retreat on Uzumaki's face. On the contrary, he seemed interested, so absorbed in the battle that he didn't notice anything around him but Sasuke and his death-defying movements. It was like a conversation, like a mutual argument, as if they were really communicating in this way and no other, as if it was the only way to reach each other. In battle, they were definitely equal in strength. But that wasn't often the deciding factor in a fight. The deciding factor was stamina, and here the Uchiha was inferior to the seemingly endlessly energetic Naruto. At one point, another attack lost its speed just for a second, but it was enough for Sasuke to miss the blow. The chakra-flavored blow of a strong palm split his chest. The Uchiha fell, choking and feeling blood in his mouth. Sasuke looked up to see Uzumaki standing in front of him. Naruto was looking on with unconcealed delight and smiling. And the Uchiha shuddered at that smile. For Naruto, this was all akin to a game. He liked what was going on, definitely liked it. "You're good, Sasuke-chan," the criminal said, smiling. "Good." He licked the blood from the red ring on his ring finger. "Too bad I'll have to kill you," he said coldly. "Naruto." Sakura's voice came from out of nowhere, but in an instant she was between him and Sasuke. She spread her arms to protect the Uchiha and pressed her trembling lips together, looking with such impenetrable pain and pleading that she looked like she was about to cry. Naruto raised his eyebrows in surprise. Looking at her, the girl was no match for him. Not even Kakashi-sensei, who immediately appeared next to her, was no match for him. Sensei's face was tense and he frowned, apparently realizing his opponent's superiority as well. "Don't," Sasuke hissed, rising to his feet, blood pouring onto the water and drowning in it. "Sasuke-kun," Haruno's voice shook as she turned back to her friend, tears of regret spurting from her eyes. "A crying ninja, what could be more disgusting?" Naruto grinned, looking at her mockingly and immediately receiving a piercing look from her green eyes in return. "Naruto," Kakashi-sensei began cautiously, frowning. "Look, all whatever," Uzumaki grumbled unhappily, tossing his head back. "I'll just kill you all." He pulled out a kunai in one deft and swift movement, and in an instant, he was right next to Sensei, slashing his stomach, cutting through his vest all the way to his chest. Then, holding the man's body and dodging Sakura's crude punching technique, he ripped out Hataki's special eye and crushed it in his fist, immediately unclenching his fingers and letting the white bloody sludge drip onto the water. "It's not good to cheat, Sensei," he whispered and threw the still-alive Kakashi at Sakura. The girl, trembling with sudden fear, clutched the unconscious man in her arms, settling down on the water and looking up at her former comrade. Dark, slippery entrails showed from the shinobi's ripped abdomen. Uzumaki, with a completely impenetrable face and icy steel in his calm gaze, brought his hand over the girl, but stopped when he felt another man's palm on his shoulder. "Naruto-kun, we didn't have orders to kill them." The cheerful voice of the orange-masked man made the offender turn around. "All the more reason for Sasuke-kun to be useful to us in the future." His hand squeezed the boy's shoulder harder. Naruto stared at him for a few seconds, then deftly put the kunai away and turned to Sakura and Sasuke and smiled coldly at them. It would be better if we never see each other again. He shifted his gaze to Kakashi-sensei and grinned. Otherwise, the same thing awaits you. Having said that, Uzumaki turned around and he and Tobi, taking a few steps forward, soon disappeared. Naruto! Sasuke clenched his teeth, looking at the water with a dose of annoyed despair. Sasuke-kun dash. Sakura's quiet, teary voice trembled. The Uchiha looked up at her and noticed that Kakashi's body was almost halfway underwater, and if Haruno wasn't holding him now, the man would have drowned. He's not breathing, the girl said even more quietly, dropping tears on her teacher's face as she tried unsuccessfully to heal the fatal wounds on his body. Sasuke's eyes reflected disbelief and he walked over and sat next to her, looking into Kakashi's pale face. His heart was beating so painfully loud in his chest that he wanted to rip it out. Haruno's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She bit her lip looking at her teacher's face and was still trying to make him live, pouring her own chakra into the already dead body with unsuccessful desperation. She didn't even want to believe, not even so much that Kakashi-sensei was dead, but that Naruto, his former student and one of what she thought was her best friends, had killed him. Sasuke stood up and turned away. His insides ached with the painful realization of what had happened, but as always, he didn't allow himself to show his emotions to the extent that he felt them. His chest was torn with the urge to scream with rage and despair, but he remained silent as he listened to Haruno's sobs, which soon ceased as well. After all, there was a war going on in the world, there was no room or time for regret and pain. Get up and walk forward, and if necessary over the corpses of those who were walking beside you a second ago. Wipe away your tears, don't whine and complain. Stand up and fight until you yourself become one of the corpses to be walked over by other generations. Boldly march to your own death to the march of the merciless war machine. Or do you have some other, ninja way? Chapter 2 The Attempt. 7 Shinobi bodies fell to the ground one by one. Naruto turned to look at them, checking to see if he needed to finish them off. He didn't. Naruto-kun, you were very cruel to your former comrades, Tobi said as he walked around the corpses, following the boy and studying the scroll he had obtained. They were making their way to the top of empty Nikiyami to retrieve the second important scroll for the organization, so Uzumaki was usually in front, clearing the way for them, and Tobi was behind, covering the rear and the top just in case. Their standard and quite effective scheme is a small vanguard area guard. Is it? Naruto made a few clones and sent them forward. Yeah, why did you kill your teacher? Tobi sighed, looking at the mountainside to their right. I would have killed them all, Tobi-chan, snorted Naruto. No! Stretched out the man, quickly leveling with him. How many times do I have to tell you? He whimpered muffledly from beneath his mask. Call me Tobi-senpai. Senpai. Naruto, wrinkling his nose, pulled him away from him. You call Zetsu senpai, don't you? Tobi didn't want to give up so easily. And even Haiden. There was resentment in his voice. And Deidara. I'm sorry, Tobi-chan, but I won't call you senpai. Naruto shook his head and immediately tensed as he felt his clones being destroyed. His partner fell silent as well, they both stopped. Uzumaki broke out into a smile. Finally, he whispered with anticipation and rushed forward. Tobi sighed and followed, folding and putting away the scroll as he went. Naruto was young, incredibly expressive, and truly ruthless. There was not a hint of the brutality inherent in ordinary assassins. He did not seek to maim or disable his opponent, but always sought to kill, and so when he struck, his blows were always precise and deadly. He never hesitated, never pondered, and killed with an incredibly steady hand. His seasoned professionalism, polished by the incessant war, was mesmerizing, but at the same time frightening. It was impossible to predict what this unbridled thirst for power, coupled with a talent for killing, would become in the future, and whether it would become a double-edged blade for Naruto and the entire organization. Sasuke and Sakura stood in the Hokage's office, staring gloomily at the floor. The entire village already knew that Kakashi-sensei had been killed, and more importantly, by whom he had been killed. Well, Fugaka said, rubbing the bridge of his nose tiredly. I think it's obvious to everyone that the return of Uzumaki Naruto to the village is impossible. He looked at the faces of the shinobi standing before him. Therefore, from now on, he is equal to S-rank criminals, which means you can kill him the next time you see him and it won't be considered anything other than the execution of a criminal. Sakura pressed her lips together, lowering her head even lower and hiding her pain-filled gaze. Sasuke, on the other hand, looked at his father openly and calmly without lowering his head. I will continue to search for Naruto, he said in an impassioned tone, breaking the silence. Alone, if necessary. And I won't let you kill him. He frowned grimly, looking into Fugaka's eyes with hard determination. Sasuke-kun. Regret froze in Harino's eyes. Naruto had changed. He killed Kakashi-sensei. He's no longer the man we knew. She spoke softly, dropping her gaze to the floor again. You need to accept it, Sasuke. The Hokage nodded, covering his eyes and shifting his eyebrows. He's my friend. The Uchiha cut him off. And I will do anything to save him. Fugaka looked at his son's face with silent disapproval, then sighed. He knew he couldn't change Sasuke's mind if he decided something for himself. All right. He nodded calmly. Then, since you are the most interested in the success of the operation, you will lead the search party. We'll find Uzumaki Naruto, and you'll decide whether to kill him or not. But bring him back to the village. He frowned harshly, raising his voice slightly and glaring at the shinobi demandingly. Dead or alive? He's our weapon, and since we found him, we can't let anyone else use him. Understood. Sasuke replied dryly with a nod and turned and walked quickly out of his father's office. Naruto yawned. He sat on the highest point of Mount Nikiyami and watched the sun slowly sinking to the horizon, the thick scarlet rays of sunset caressing the surrounding area. A warm, dry wind rustled the leaves of the trees below. Naruto smiled, squinting and feeling with every cell the natural energy and power that enveloped the space around him. Tobi was communicating with the leader of the organization somewhere in the caves of the mountain itself, and Uzumaki waited patiently for him to finish, at the same time watching the surroundings and cleaning up the occasional ninja who had suicidally decided to fight off the scroll, engaging in an unequal and doomed battle. The Uchiha's chakra at the foot of the mountain made Naruto curse. He didn't even move, only sighed and decided to let Sasuke climb up if he had to. It didn't take the genius of the Uchiha clan as long as Uzumaki would have liked, so Naruto soon felt his burning, piercing gaze on the back of his neck and looked over his shoulder. Someone else's deliberately hidden chakra could be felt nearby, but the renegade ninja couldn't tell who it belonged to. How's Kakashi-sensei doing? Have they buried it yet? Naruto stretched his lips in a mocking smile, looking at Sasuke with venomous amusement. Why did you kill him? The Uchiha asked dryly and withdrew his katana from its sheath. There was an unwavering determination in his red, scrutinizing eyes. That's a stupid question. Naruto turned away, grinning. Naruto, I will return you to Konohagakure, no matter what it takes. Sasuke hissed, and a moment later a fireball covered the spot where Uzumaki now sat. Naruto, who had jumped up, folded the seals using the familiar cloning technique. The clones folded the seals as well and, taking more air into their lungs, exhaled the flames at the Uchiha. Oh, it worked. Naruto smiled in surprise. And again, he folded the seals again and exhaled the fire with the clones. A dazed Sasuke, who had flown up on the bird he had summoned, gave him a look of bewilderment and questioning. This is the Uchiha clan's technique. He reminded him for some reason, staring intensely at the Uzumaki who had jumped to the ground. Oh, this is embarrassing! Naruto grinned mockingly and threw several kunai at him, hitting the bird and exploding. Sasuke jumped to the ground. The stone beneath his feet was still hot. Naruto folded the seals and the ground around him went in waves. Just like when he was a kid, he commented cheerfully in response to the Uchiha's grim look. Several clones attacked Sasuke and, as soon as the guy destroyed one of them, synchronously exploded next to him. The Uchiha, who hadn't expected this, dodged thanks to his reaction alone, but the explosion still caught him with a shockwave and stone shards. Naruto attacked at the same instant, shifting into his favorite melee, looking sharp-eyed and smiling broadly. He dodged Sasuke's blow, caught him by the forearm and threw him over his hip, immediately getting on top and stabbing the kunai into his right eye. The blade froze a centimeter from his dilated pupil. Sasuke, breathing hard, didn't understand how he hadn't been able to keep up with Uzumaki's speed or how something like this could have happened. Shikamaru. Naruto's eyes were calmly understanding, and he kept his eyes fixed on the Uchiha with a cold stare. Hello? Shikamaru, holding his shadow, sighed and forced the renegade ninja to let go of Sasuke. Angry? Surprised, Naruto looked at him. You killed Kakashi-sensei, the boy muttered glumly, looking on with careful judgment. Well, I'm sorry. Uzumaki rolled his eyes. I didn't realize he was the soul of your company. Shikamaru held a long, judgmental look at him. You're coming back to Konohagakure with us. Shikamaru sighed, the first drop of sweat rolling down his temple. It was still hard to hold Naruto down. I don't think so. The boy shook his head, his gaze turning scarlet and his pupil lengthening. Orange, burning chakra gradually began to surround his body. Naruto-kun! Hinata, appearing as if out of nowhere, and a scowling Miji. Byakugan? Uzumaki exhaled, literally feeling his consciousness leave him as if from a sharp blow, drowning him in a whitish, restraining abyss. Shikamaru removed the restraining technique, and Naruto stabbed the kunai into his arm with a quick and jagged movement, trying to stay conscious, but a sharp blow to the back of his head finally knocked him out. Sasuke picked the guy up, preventing him from falling. Hinata, exhausted by the technique she had realized, fell to her knees, breathing heavily. Still, it took a much greater concentration of chakra than usual to knock out Uzumaki. Tobi, who had emerged from the cave, only watched as Konohagakure's shinobi carried his partner away somewhere. Finally, with a sigh, he summoned a small fox and sent to follow them. What do you mean Naruto's been kidnapped? Deidara's shadow shrieked indignantly, blue eyes flashing. Well, Tobi scratched the back of his head. Naruto-kun needs to be more serious about fighting. I thought this incident would teach him to take his opponents seriously. You're a fool. Hayden concluded with a chuckle. Come on, I took his cloak and sent a fox after him. I'll rescue him in a couple hours. Tobi muttered resentfully. Where are you now? Deidara rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mount Nikiyami. The bomber's shadow disappeared. Find him and bring him back. Pain said, looking at Tobi sternly, his gaze filled with rings of Rinnegan. And no more unauthorized lessons. From now on, okay? He frowned. Okay. Tobi nodded resentfully. This is why he doesn't call you senpai. Sasori said coldly and disappeared. Hayden laughed loudly. Come on, the young man will be fine, I trained him, and he's learned true pain, the Jashin's servant said with a wide grin. Kisame gave him a grim look and disappeared. The leader, covering his eyes with his hand, tiredly ordered Uzumaki back once more and preferred to leave. Following him, the others also ceased contact. Naruto woke up, writhing in pain at the back of his head. He opened his eyes. His mind was a jumble of thoughts and memories, the standard consequences of a technique implemented with a Byakugan. He had experienced something similar once before, in battle. A feeling of prostration came over his head. He lifted a blank stare into the night sky, habitually deciding to tell the time first. The moon had already risen. His head was buzzing, reality unfocused and swaying, pain pounding in his temples. The guy shook his head, and he was immediately dizzy, as if he'd been spinning on a centrifuge for hours before. Like after Deidara-senpai's training. He complained, trying in vain to regain consciousness. Are you awake? A familiar voice nearby and the touch of a cool palm on his cheek. Naruto focused his eyes, using a great deal of willpower, and saw Sasuke's face in front of him. Don't try anything. You're immobilized by the Hyuga clan's special technique, he said calmly. I'm going to be sick. Naruto complained, wrinkling his nose and looking away. Wow, you're all right. A surprised voice came from Kiba. Creepy, He smiled. Usually you spend 24 hours unconscious from that technique, but you've been out of it for a couple of hours, he said, a touch of approval in his voice. I wouldn't say I did. Naruto snorted, looking away. What do you want from me? He was trying to restore the chakra inside him, but in addition to the complex technique of Hyuga, the effects of which were still too well felt, he was also bound with ropes that blocked the process of chakra stabilization in the body. Uzumaki wasn't sure he could use any techniques at all right now. Somehow we've been foolish, Kurama echoed grimly inside. Naruto only grinned, not answering anything. Stupid indeed. We're saving you, Inuzuka replied, surprised. Naruto finally looked at him, and then looked around at the rest of the ninja. They were sitting in the thick of the forest, apparently having decided to stop for a while to take a break, but they were careful not to make camp or start a fire. Shikamaru, Sakura, Niji, Hinata, Kiba, Akamaru, and Sasuke. Where's Lee? Naruto wondered, raising his eyebrows. He could feel his presence, but somehow he couldn't see it. Here. He jumped down from the tree and stood in front of Naruto. Lee! Uzumaki smiled broadly and kindly. It's good to see you, he said sincerely, with his usual good-naturedness, making everyone look surprised and wary. I wish we could have met under different circumstances. He shrugged guiltily. Yes. Lee nodded and smiled softly at him, also quite surprised. Naruto-kun, I can't believe you killed Kakashi-sensei. He frowned. Uzumaki's face immediately darkened. I don't understand why you're so surprised. The smile fell off his face and he frowned irritably. He's not the first, and he won't be the last. His gaze finally paled. No, Naruto-kun, Lee pressed his lips together. It's because you killed him. You killed your sensei. The boy's eyes flickered with condemnation mixed with painful incomprehension. Well, not that he taught me much. Uzumaki shrugged indifferently, and the next second he got a hard punch in the face from a furious Sakura, who was now looking like she was capable of crushing rocks. Naruto spit up the blood and gave the girl an icy stare that was instantly colored with cruel anger. Do you want to die too? He hissed, grinning a bloody grin. Haruno grabbed him by the shirt on his chest and yanked him up, looking into the boy's eyes with hatred. What has become of you, Naruto? She yelled and slammed the guy's back against a tree trunk. Answer me! Bright anger blazed in her green eyes. Naruto cocked his head at her and licked his lips as he sat back down on the ground. Uzumaki remained silent, looking into the girl's face with icy and firm menace. Haruno frowned, clutching her broken nose, but the shivers of the fear that comes from facing a superior predator traveled through her body. The shinobi, sensing the threat, looked tensely at the boy. Hinata and Niji's Spyokugen activated. Sasuke clenched the hilt of his katana. Naruto-kun, your chakra is terrifying, Hinata said, looking at the fox's orange chakra burning fiercely in the Uzumaki. But as long as I can block it, you won't do anything. She glared firmly at the boy, frowning. Uzumaki shrugged nonchalantly. You're right. He nodded. The shinobi exhaled barely perceptibly. The problem was, when Naruto used chakra, they didn't know what to expect from him. Uzumaki had left the village when he turned 13 and spent the next 5 years in the Akatsuki criminal organization, and not much was known about his abilities now. Sasuke sighed and sat down flat across from the boy, looking at him calmly and with a tinge of intense scrutiny, as if he wanted to figure something out for himself. Naruto sighed doomedly. Now you're going to start talking. He leaned back against the tree trunk, staring longingly at the sky. Naruto, I want to understand you and your actions. The Uchiha began quietly but firmly. Do I have to explain? Uzumaki raised an eyebrow, looking at him like he was crazy. What you're doing now will get you nowhere but more darkness. He frowned. That's my ninja way. He smiled ironically, looking into his former comrade's eyes with a cheeky sneer. Naruto, I want to help. You're my best friend, and I won't give up so easily when I finally found you, he said confidently. I understand your pain, your hatred, and I'm willing to accept them. It's normal to feel something like that after what happened to you, but understand, it's not the village's fault. It's nobody's fault. Shut up, Naruto said with a tired sigh, wrinkling his nose in irritation. Do you always talk so much? He arched an eyebrow. Naruto, just hear me. I did. And I still do, you know, I'm not deaf. He grinned. And I know what you mean. And I know a lot more than you do. He glared at the boy. You say we're friends? You say you can understand my pain? My hatred? All right, so be it. I hear you. But the problem is, Sasuke-chan, you may believe that, but I don't. You're a member of the clan that slaughtered my family and seized power in Konohagakure. Do you have any idea how wrong you are to call yourself my friend? Do you realize how disgusted I am to hear that? Do you have any idea how much I despise you, your entire clan, and everything you believe in? Can you imagine how I felt when my parents were murdered in front of me? I doubt it, he said calmly, even with a tinge of indifference, as if it didn't affect him at all. Or pretended it didn't. I understand, but shut your mouth. His gaze became scalding sharp, full of black, utterly immense hatred and anger, but his voice, despite the steely intonations of threat that twitched in it, remained calm. Naruto never lost his temper. You can't understand another person's pain without experiencing the same. You can't understand the pain of someone who lost everyone close to them in one day when you don't even know what it feels like. I'm sick of you and your hypocritical friendship, every single scumbag from your bitch clan, the Will of Fire, your Hokage, and this whole world filled with people like you willing to kill on command. So do me a favor and get the fuck away from me. He hissed, looking at Sasuke pointedly. I understand what you're saying, but this isn't the way. It's not going to change anything. The Uchiha stared back calmly. No. You don't understand. You never will. Uzumaki's lips cut into a contemptuous grin. I'm offended by the mere fact that you think you understand anything. It's disgusting. He turned away, looking away and wrinkling his nose. A faint pain was reflected on Sasuke's face. He suddenly felt not just a black bottomless abyss between them, but a wall an unimaginably high, immensely thick wall of burning hatred that separated them from each other. And because of this wall they could no longer hear each other. And the worst part of it all was that Naruto's hatred was justified. When Uzumaki was 8 years old, the Uchiha clan did indeed stage a coup, slaughtering just under half the village, the Hokage's supporters, and killing the Hokage himself, which at the time was Naruto's father Namake's Minato. The Uchiha killed him and his wife in front of their young child and would have killed Naruto himself if not for Itachi, and then Shursui. The fact that he is the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and thus presumably one of the village's most powerful weapons in the future, played a key role in keeping Naruto alive. Naruto spent the next year after his parents were killed in the Umbu special institutions, and after that spent another year silent and shunned by everyone except Itachi. Afterward, he never said what happened to him during that year, preferring to shrug his shoulders in a detached manner and smile broadly. They hadn't interacted much with Sasuke before they'd been assigned to the same team, more just watching each other, and while the young Uchiha was interested and somewhat jealous his older brother spent a lot of time with Naruto, the Uzumaki was wary and even fearful, clearly avoiding any members of the Uchiha clan other than Itachi. But when they were assigned to the same team, everything fell into place. They began to compete with each other. Naruto showed neither hatred nor contempt and seemed to have forgotten about the incident, if not for one incident that turned everything upside down, an incident after which nothing could ever be the same again. At the Chunin exam, someone had shown up to take away the Jinchuriki's child. Sasuke remembered this turning point clearly. A black cloak with blood-red clouds, pale skin, and the dead stare of violet eyes mottled with rings. Naruto's back pressed against Sasuke's back, the corpses of shinobi all around, and the acrid, unbearable terror that came up to his throat and clogged his consciousness. Completely unequal combat, terrifying superiority of the enemy, and utter helplessness. The Uchiha clenched his teeth, trying to keep the fear from overwhelming him, the kunai in his hand twitching. Sasuke. Naruto's wary voice and the feel of his friend's warm back pressed against him. We can do this. confidence rang in his voice, and the look he gave his enemy was colored with steely determination. "Cover me." He smiled and tore forward. Sasuke exhaled, gathering himself and activating his Sharingan. "It's alright. They'll be fine." Naruto's confidence transferred to the Uchiha and rumbled in his chest. His hand gripped the kunai tighter. The world sped up Uzumaki's clones, his rough movements and Sasuke's deft lunges, the fire bursting from his lungs and the tinkling of the kunai. All that mattered now not to die. The man easily blocked their blows, seeming to look them over, then, having drawn conclusions for himself, threw Sasuke back into the wall with force and intercepted Naruto's arm, yanking him up and looking him haughtily in the face. "And you're not disgusted?" he said in a cold, emotionless voice, staring into the child's eyes. "What?" Uzumaki exhaled, trying to move, but now as if constrained by the stare of his enemy's strange eyes. "Isn't it disgusting to be paired with one of them who killed your father?" Naruto shuddered, a look of dazed horror in his eyes. "What do you know?" he exhaled. A large shiver ran through his body. "And you?" The man stared coldly into his eyes. "What do you know about your father? About yourself? Or about the power you possess?" He shifted his gaze to the child's stomach and touched it, revealing the black seal of the nine tails. Then he looked at Naruto's face once more and released him, looking down at the no longer fleeing Uzumaki. "If you want to know, come to me." He looked into Naruto's eyes. "If, of course, you care about your father's death," he added coldly and turned and disappeared. Naruto was interrogated for 2 days afterward, but he said nothing more. Just as he had done when he was a child, he remained silent, staring blankly at the floor as if he wasn't even here. "Naruto!" Sasuke arrived at his house, knocking on the door and calling out to him for a long time before his friend finally opened it for him. "How are you?" The Uchiha looked into his pale, expressionless face. Uzumaki only opened the door slightly, looking at the floor, and nodded absently, as if he hadn't even heard the question. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Sasuke didn't know what to do. He had never faced something like this before and simply didn't know how to act. "Would you like some ramen? Or I can get my brother if you want." Naruto shook his head and finally raised his head, his empty blue eyes staring at the Uchiha, and smiled weakly. "Just leave me alone for a while," he asked quietly, a tinge of guilt slipping into his voice. Sasuke nodded slowly and awkwardly waved goodbye and walked away, hearing the door slam behind him. A feeling of desolation gripped him as well. He didn't know how to help his close friend, even though he could see that he was far from all right, and it truly tormented him. The nasty feeling of his own powerlessness and uselessness was nagging at the back of his mind. He knew that Naruto was suffering, and he was suffering from it himself, but he simply didn't know what to do or if there was anything he could do to make it stop. He hung around the evening Kanehagakura for a few more hours, pondering what had happened and the words of that red-haired man, then decided to find out what it all meant from his brother, but before he did, his gaze came across a store. The Uchiha bought a few boxes of ramen and walked briskly back to Naruto's house. Things were going to get better. He just needed to show him that he wasn't alone, that everything would be alright, and if his father had had some misfortune in the past, it wasn't Naruto's or anyone else's fault, it was in the past. You needed to let go and move on with those who were willing to support and understand your path. When Sasuke arrived at Naruto's house, he was already gone. The Uchiha immediately realized what had happened. But not wanting to believe, with his heart beating in his chest and growing fear, he went around all the rooms of the small apartment in search of his friend, and then stayed waiting for him for a few more hours, putting boxes of ramen on the table and looking at them. All the while, he felt a suffocating, wild emptiness and fear. And also hope, a warm, eerie hope that Naruto was about to return. That it was his footsteps now echoing outside the door. But none of that was happening. When Sasuke realized that it was pointless to wait any longer, the clock hand had passed 12 at night, he went home. He was met by a worried Itachi, who asked what was wrong. As the younger Uchiha buried his face in his chest, hiding his own tears, The older Uchiha sighed and only stroked his hair, lifting a wistful gaze to the night sky. It wasn't until the morning that the elder Uchiha reported Naruto missing, thus deliberately giving him a head start to escape. Sasuke didn't know that before he himself had come to see Naruto, he had Itachi. Didn't know that Itachi was the one who had taken Uzumaki away from the Umbu ward after the interrogation, and didn't know about their conversation. And hadn't found out about it until now, and it was unlikely he ever would. In Naruto's apartment, Itachi was making tea while Uzumaki sat at the table, staring blankly at his hands. "Itachi-san," the boy said hoarsely. It was his first words in 2 days. "Yes?" The boy turned around and placed a mug of hot tea in front of him. "That man. He said he knows something about my father," he said quietly, wrapping his hands around the cup and looking into it. "And that if I wanted to know something too, I should go to him," he added and looked up, looking at the Uchiha sitting across from him. "What should I do, Itachi-san?" He exhaled, and his childish, always naively cheerful face showed a great deal of pain that was too much for his age. Itachi sighed, sinking his pensive gaze into the table. "What do you want, Naruto?" he asked softly. "You're at a crossroads right now. On the one hand, you can live in Konohagakure with your friends, with Sasuke and me, and just forget everything that happened in your past. And on the other hand, you can learn something that will probably change your life and your attitude towards me, Sasuke, and the village forever." He looked seriously into the boy's eyes. "But that's for you to decide. Sooner or later there comes a moment in everyone's life when they have to make a fateful decision." Itachi shrugged and smiled good-naturedly, reaching out and ruffling the child's hair. "I'm sorry you have to accept him at this age, but you know what?" He smiled softly, looking with warmth and understanding. "You're going to make it through this. Don't doubt yourself." Naruto stared in surprise at the warm acceptance in his eyes, and felt the support he so desperately needed right now. He had always felt it from Itachi, come to think of it. Uzumaki smiled quietly and nodded, looking back gratefully. "And whatever decision you make," Itachi removed his hand, continuing to look at him. "We'll still remain friends." He extended his fist forward. Naruto smiled wider and nodded confidently, bumping his fist against the guy's fist. From there, they just drank tea. First in the cozy, quiet silence that happens between people close to each other, then Itachi started to say something funny about missions and Shursui. Naruto smiled back quietly and nodded occasionally, warmed by the hot tea and Itachi's warm voice. "Think it over well, Naruto," the Uchiha said as he said goodbye, placing his hand on the child's head. "And don't get lost on your way." He smiled and left. Uzumaki exhaled and threw back his head, looking up at the ceiling. His chest warmed at Itachi's words. He smiled and pushed his bangs back. He had made a decision today. There are no easy paths, and living without knowing everything until the end was not for him. He pulled out his bag and began to hastily pack his things. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Sasuke. But Naruto didn't need to talk to him anymore. Sasuke would have continued to sit across from Naruto, silently staring at his changed, grown-up face and thinking of the right words to say to get through to Uzumaki, if it hadn't been for the barking of Akamaru, who jumped to his feet. The dog soon growled, raising his head upwards. The shinobi reacted, grabbing their weapons and wary, listening and freezing. "Naruto Kuyuan!" stretched out Tobi, waving at him with one hand and holding on to Deidara with the other. They flew together on a bird made of white clay. Naruto lifted a surprised look up into the sky and shook his head and smiled. "We're going to save you from those assholes now, Naruto." Deidara threw several bombs on the ground. Tobi jumped after them and, blocking the blows of the shinobi who remained on their feet after the explosion, wading through the dense veil of dust and sand created by the explosions, cut the ropes on Uzumaki and yanked the boy up, helping him to his feet. Deidara's clay clones scurried around, happily throwing bombs, immobilizing the shinobi and preventing them from getting close to Naruto. "Is everything okay?" Tobi squeezed the boy's shoulder, looking into his eyes. "Byakugan." Naruto shook his head. "I'm not sure I can fight properly right now." "I'm sorry, Tobi-chan." Toby shook his head, throwing his arm over his shoulder, picked him up and jerked upwards, grabbing onto the clay ladder Deidara had extended, which immediately lifted them up onto the bird. The bird gained altitude, dodging the kunai and volleys of fire flying at it, and immediately flew away. Wow, they're following us. Deidara looked down in surprise. Let's fly higher. He smiled broadly. The bird began to gain altitude quickly. Should we go down and kill them all? Toby suggested, absent-mindedly scratching the back of his head. We don't kill without orders. Deidara grinned. And their lives aren't that important to us right now. He shrugged and sighed when he was finally sure he wasn't going to be picked up off the ground. The next moment, however, the Uchiha's summoned hawk appeared behind him, with Sasuke himself sitting on its back. He grinned and tossed a dozen small bombs from the bird, which all reached their target at once. Sasuke shattered some of them, but that only made them explode faster. The wounded hawk dived to the ground and disappeared. Are you okay, Naruto? Deidara turned to the boy and looked him over. Toby threw the organization cloak over his shoulders. Yeah, sorry, senpai, Naruto nodded sluggishly, sliding his hands through the sleeves of the cloak. Thanks for saving me, he added with a frown, looking down. I'm always looking out for you. Deidara smiled encouragingly and gave him a friendly one-armed hug, slamming his fist into his side softly. And anyway, it's not your fault, it's that asshole's. He frowned unhappily and shoved Toby with his foot. Deidara senpai. He stretched out resentfully. It's not Tobi-chan's fault. Naruto shook his head, turning around and looking down at the treetops with a heavy gaze. But it won't happen again. Deidara held a thoughtful look at him and, with a nod, ruffled the boy's hair. I like your attitude, he said approvingly. Chapter 3 The Only Problem. Naruto-kun, it would be much more efficient to distribute chakra in larger volumes, but in a smaller space. Toby was sitting on a rock with his hand resting on his head, watching Naruto practice. Uzumaki turned around in surprise. He hadn't noticed his approach at all. Okay, Tobi-chan. He nodded and tried to do as he was advised. His fist pierced through the mountain as if carving a tunnel through it. Did it seem to work? Naruto stared into the opening. Yes, well done. Toby nodded. I'm pleased that you listened to my advice, even though you don't call me senpai, he said with childlike serenity. You're a strong shinobi, Tobi-chan. Naruto shrugged. And I'm glad we're paired. He turned around on him and smiled widely. Toby's facial expression couldn't be determined because of the mask, but he nodded slowly. They were practicing in the moss-covered mountains. Literally a few meters away from Naruto was a real cliff, with rocks like the mouth of a monster, bristling with sharp peaks. There was also a rushing waterfall flowing into a swift mountain river. That time, a month ago with the shinobi from Konohagakure. Toby looked toward the cliff. I'm sorry I let them get you, Naruto-kun, he said, making his voice quieter. Naruto grinned and reached out and walked over to him. It's okay, he shrugged, taking off his cloak and t-shirt and placing it on the rock next to Toby. You were supposed to pick up the scroll. The man looked at him again. You think the scroll is more important than your life? Well, Naruto scratched the back of his head absently. The interests of the organization are more important. He nodded. Toby punched him lightly in the stomach. Why? Uzumaki exhaled, writhing painfully, bending slightly and feeling that the blow, though not physically strong, was properly chakra-laden. You once abandoned our mission to keep Sasori and Deidara from dying, Toby said calmly, but there was something tense in his voice. Don't talk to me about the organization's interests. He grinned. If your life was in danger, I'd save you too. Naruto grinned and put his hand on Toby's head, surprising him. You're the only family I have. And I don't want to lose any of you, he said with a serious, heavy gaze looking into the darkness of the mask. So by the interests of the organization, I mean the interests of my family. And if I have to die to dash, you won't, Toby said, standing up and turning away. Just don't risk your life over bullshit, Naruto-kun. He walked in the opposite direction of the cliff. And that time, by the way, I had everything under control. I would have intervened if I'd realized that your life was in danger," he said resentfully, in his usual manner with a touch of non-seriousness. "I'll go contact the leader." He waved his hand without turning around. Naruto grinned and laughed softly as he looked at him with slight surprise. For just a second, something like embarrassment flickered in the serious tone of Tobi's voice that he so rarely showed to others. Uzumaki turned around to face the cliff and sprinted and jumped down, feeling the frantic currents of air in his face, the sudden acceleration in flight, and the total lack of oxygen. He screamed, happily cackling under the currents of wind roaring in his ears, and fell straight into the river, immediately surfacing and inhaling deeply. His strong body swam against the harsh mountainous current of the swift river and swam to the rocky shore. On the shore, Naruto tucked back his wet hair and sighed, looking up into the bright, blue sky overhead. He walked over to the right spot, picked up the pre-prepared kunai and wire from the ground, then, exhaling and closing his eyes, began throwing them at the rocks, building a rigid wire net cage around him. The intersecting lines of wire soon bounded the space. Finished, Naruto wanted to move on to the next stage, but froze and turned around, staring tensely into the space between the rocks. Sasuke appeared a few minutes later and stopped, looking at Uzumaki. "That's my brother's technique," he grinned, nodding at the fishing lines, and resumed his stride. "Stay back." Naruto dropped Naruto, looking at him coldly and not even surprised anymore. Sasuke drew his katana, ran his fingers along the hilt, gripping it more comfortably, and immediately sped up, pushing himself off the ground and jumping up to cut the fishing line in a U-turn. In this technique it was important to cut correctly, otherwise the cage will close. Sasuke almost succeeded. 4 of the 5 key strands fell down, followed by the rest of the cage. Naruto raised his head, watching as the 5th thread slid smoothly and quickly through the air, catching the others and tightening, trapping the wrist of the hand clutching the katana. Uzumaki immediately steps on the fishing line, pulling it tighter. Sasuke's arm jerks back, he is led downward, the fishing line cuts his skin, but the guy, dodging, intercepts the katana with his other hand and cuts the line. Naruto grabs it. He pulls the Uchiha towards him and punches him in the face, temporarily depriving him of his sight, and folding a few seals summons a creature that instead of a whole body has a single grinning maw and 1,000 bloody white hands around it. The hands immediately grab Sasuke, pulling him behind them, squeezing and pulling him into the maw. Sasuke stares dumbfounded, cupping several of the arms and thrusting a chidori into the very mouth of the creature. The arm is pierced by sharp fangs, but it disappears. Triumph plays in Naruto's red eyes, and he grins. 3 minutes? He drops it. "You have 3 minutes." He snatches the kunai and attacks. Sasuke immediately realizes what he means. He understands, because he can't feel his bitten hand. The poison from his fangs is gradually paralyzing him. Naruto attacks without restraint, his movements still deadly. But Uchiha clearly realizes that Uzumaki, like himself, does not use those techniques that could really kill. And while Sasuke's reasons are clear, he doesn't want to kill his friend. Naruto's reasons are not clear. But the fact remains Uchiha didn't use Susanoo, and Naruto doesn't seem to have utilized Nine-Tailed chakra at all. How? Hissed Sasuke and attacked, his katana sparking with lightning. If you can send lightning into a katana, why would you put your hand in the monster's mouth? Naruto wondered. Jumping up and dodging, he threw the bombs at the guy, then switched back to close combat, deciding that since he was fighting, he could practice his newly learned technique. Concentrating his chakra, he punches the Uchiha in the stomach, breaking several ribs and knocking out his internal organs without counting. Sasuke exhales blood. His limbs finally go numb, and he can't get up anymore. Breathing becomes difficult and painful. Naruto summons the creature back. White arms reach out and wrap around him, and a rough red tongue sticks out of its mouth. The creature clings to the contractor who summoned it and begins to lick it, rumbling something. Naruto, writhing, strokes the monster and drives his hand into its flesh, somewhere between its writhing arms. The monster doesn't react in any way. Uzumaki pulls out a moving piece of dark blue innards, sits down next to Sasuke, and tears it open with a crack, pouring the burgundy sludge onto the boy's arm where the bite wounds are, In a couple hours, the paralysis will wear off. Naruto says quietly and tosses the lump of guts aside. The monster frankly pats him, and Uzumaki strokes its long white arms. It's time for you to go home, Pom-Pom, he says. Thanks for helping. He removes the summons. Sasuke feels the paralysis slowing and looks at Naruto carefully. Why don't you kill me? He raises his eyebrows ironically. Because Itachi-san would be upset, Naruto says quietly and detachedly, without looking at him, and stands up with the clear intention of leaving. Don't you dare leave! Sasuke, choking with rage, speaks louder than necessary, and his echo bounces off the walls. The guy rises up on his elbows, using simply inhuman effort of will, and stares angrily at the back of Uzumaki's head. What does my brother have to do with this? There's genuine rage in his voice, his prickly gaze burning. Naruto turns around and stares back coldly. I don't want to upset your brother, he says evenly. Sasuke's face turns white at the incredible anger that comes over him. Anger so strong and brutal that he rises to his feet and grips the katana tighter under Naruto's surprised gaze. Strong streams of chakra lift up his hair. Susanoo appears as an armored warrior and slashes Naruto's chest with his sword before he can react. The Uchiha's movements quicken and his blows become stronger. He grabs Naruto, clasping him in the warrior's fingers. This is our fight. Sasuke hissed hatefully, glaring at Uzumaki. Don't you dare mention Itachi! He squeezes the boy tighter. Naruto feels his ribs break, and his head drops down. His eyes turn red, his pupil narrows, and orange chakra envelopes his body, unclenching the warrior's fingers. Naruto swings in and chops off Susanoo's arm, jumps to the ground and immediately creates about 100 clones that attack simultaneously. Sasuke burns them with Amaterasu's black fire. A clawed hand of orange chakra slashes through Susanoo and pulls the Uchiha out. Uzumaki throws him into the wall, immediately jerks back up and goes into melee range again, punching the guy in the face and finally nailing his hands to the rock with his kunai. Afterward, pressing his hand against the guy's chest, drawing out his chakra. Sasuke clenches his teeth and stares into the bloodshot eyes with demanding determination, feeling the chakra leave his body in a steady stream. In a weakened body, the paralysis quickly intensifies. Come on! The Uchiha hisses, licking his bloody lips. Naruto wrinkles his nose at him and pulls his hand away. Why? Sasuke's voice is bright with anger. Why do you always see only Itachi? You're fighting with me right now. Stop thinking about my brother all the time. He stares at Uzumaki with a piercing stare. Naruto raises his eyebrows in surprise, his gaze once again colored with haughty mirth. That sounds very strange, Sasuke-chan. He grins, squinting slightly. Jealous of your brother? Like a child. Uzumaki snorts and wrinkles his nose, wiping the blood from his split lips. I'm not jealous of my brother. The Uchiha replies in a calmer, darker tone, looking at the boy in front of him with a hard and heavy gaze. Naruto stares back in bewilderment and arches an eyebrow. Sasuke doesn't answer, drilling him with his gaze and pressing his lips together, as if he's waiting for it to come to him on its own. Me? Uzumaki wondered. You're an idiot. Sasuke sighs. Isn't it so obvious? He scrutinizes his face. What isn't obvious? Naruto tilts his head to the side. I like you. The Uchiha exhales, keeping his piercing gaze on the boy. Not as a friend. He adds, seeing his confusion. Uzumaki freezes for a split second, the gears in his head snapping into place, and he stares for a while, empty from the suddenness of what he's heard, looking through the man who's been singing odes about what great friends they are. Kurama is just as surprised. The white Setsu watching the whole thing from a nearby cliff is also taken aback by this turn of events. And even Tobi, who can't hear half of it over the noise of the waterfall, freezes on his rock in surprise, wondering if he's just hearing things. I mean, you want to sleep with me? Naruto's eyebrows raised mockingly as he recovered from his shock, and then he jumped and laughed. Great! He exclaimed, much to the surprise of everyone watching. I was just wondering how I could get you to stop trying to catch me. Uzumaki grins, covering his eyes with his palm. Okay, Sasuke-chan. He removes his hand and looks coldly at the Uchiha. Sasuke flinches at that icy, emotionless stare. Naruto comes close and cuts the black sweatshirt across the guy's chest with a jerk, catching the light skin and leaving a deep scratch on top of the bruises already there. He doesn't look into Sasuke's eyes, his actions are confident and rough. The kunai stops at the waistband of his pants, and Uzumaki frowns, looking at it and considering whether he wants to cut the fabric further and see the contents of the young Uchiha clan representative's pants. Naruto strains to find that desire within himself, his brain frantically thinking of options for further action, and none of them seem appealing or at least acceptable to Naruto at all. Naruto was certainly a top-notch assassin, but Lemon wasn't. And frankly, he had no experience with lemon men at all, and in general, his experience with lemon men was far less impressive than any other experience in his life. And now, in the current situation, it wasn't that he didn't know what to do, it wasn't hard to guess, he just didn't want to. He wasn't aroused by the half-naked, beaten, chained to a rock Uchiha Sasuke, who was also watching with a Sharingan and if he wanted to, could burn Naruto right now or do something else equally effective. And what would Itachi-san say when he found out his little brother had been lemoned? Naruto twitched at the mere thought of that. And also about the reaction he could expect from the older Uchiha. What? Sasuke raised an eyebrow, grinning mockingly. Did you forget what you wanted to do? A sneer rang in his voice. Naruto looked up and glared at him grimly. It's easier for me to kill you, he said completely seriously. Sasuke smiled ironically, as if in mockery, looking with red Sharingan eyes. You could burn me, right? What are you waiting for? Naruto asked calmly, looking serious and without a shadow of fear. I don't want to kill you. And the lemon? Naruto grinned, tense apprehension flickering in his gaze. Sasuke frowned. Do I look like I'm horny? He wondered. Do I look like one to you? Uzumaki was indignant and even recoiled a little, looking at the guy with slight shock. No, Sasuke smiled. But I don't know what you've been studying all these years, not this one. Naruto frowned, shaking his head. What are we even talking about? He groaned, covering his eyes with the palm of his hand. No one's going to lemon anyone, decided, okay? Let's just shake it off normally. I don't want to go back to Konohagakure and I won't, so you'll only get me back there if I'm dead. But you don't want to kill me. And I can't kill you. And if my concern for your brother's mental health isn't good enough for you, here's another reason the organization might need you alive for something, so I won't kill you for that reason either. So how about we settle this right here and now? Fuck off, okay? He looked hopefully into the boy's eyes. No, Sasuke shook his head, looking back seriously and coldly. You're my friend. When you say something like that while half naked and chained to a wall, it looks even weirder than usual. Naruto said glumly, then ruffled his hair and sighed tiredly. Okay, whatever. He shrugged and turned away, staring thoughtfully at the river. I'm not sure there's much point to this conversation, he added grimly. Say. Sasuke squinted, not seeming at all embarrassed by the situation. Would you be able to let a loved one go so easily when you know they're in trouble and need help? Only problem I have right now is you. Uzumaki doesn't look at him, speaking coldly and detachedly. I want nothing to do with your clan, and thus nothing to do with Konohagakure. Just accept it. He turns around and walks away. And us, not close people. Louder, without turning around, he says. Don't ascribe to me supposed ties to you. Uzumaki wrinkles his nose and flinches as Tobi appears in front of him. I'll make sure he doesn't follow us, Naruto-kun. His partner says with a chuckle, clapping Uzumaki on the shoulder. Go ahead. Naruto's mind filled with nothing but curses, a shadow of grim realization on his face that his battle comrade probably heard the entire conversation, and now it's an embarrassment for the rest of his life, albeit likely a short one, as a renegade ninja from Konohagakure. Tobi watches in silence as Naruto soon disappears, and seals the twitching Sasuke behind him tighter into the wall, clutching his throat. Let go. He hissed hoarsely, writhing in pain from the steel fingers of the masked man. Sasuke-kun, Toby says in a serious and calm voice. It's time for you to stop. Go back to Konohagakure and do what you were born to do. Enough already. His voice is quiet and shrewd. The Uchiha sets him on fire without hesitation, glaring with the changed black flower of bloodshot eyes. Toby hisses in pain, but absorbs the fire, and in the same instant covers the guy's eyes with his hand, blocking his view. And after a few more seconds, Sasuke loses consciousness. Toby slowly pulls the kunai out of his hands. They're embedded in the rock up to the middle of the blade, and it's not easy to do. Finished, he walks away, leaving the Uchiha behind,